Yes, so my name's Suryanagha, this is Sachidasan, and we're going to talk a little bit about the theme this evening. We usually have a talk on Dharma Night for those of you who might have not been to Dharma Night. In the second half, we generally have a talk. Unfortunately, the teacher who was going to give the talk tonight isn't able to. So we've kind of decided to sort of just step in,
Yeah.
and we're going to kind of have a discussion with each other, kind of in a way interview each other around the theme, kind of draw each other out, and we'll probably bring you in at some point as well. So the theme, we've been doing this series on the Refuge Tree, this image on the shrine, and it's kind of like, you could call it a sort of a Buddhist tradition family tree. In a way, it's a sort of map of the entire Buddhist tradition, especially from the kind of perspective of Triratna, this Buddhist tradition that we're ordained into. It's got lots and lots of different figures, kind of emanations, forms of the Buddha on there, as well as kind of eminent Buddhist teachers throughout the ages, from the past and from the kind of more recent present. And then on the sides of the image are the figures that we're specifically going to be talking about today, or at least focusing on today. And these figures are referred to as the gods and goddesses. So, or the kind of original word is devas. And the gods and goddesses are there. Well, maybe that's enough for me from now. Why don't you say something about
Over
the
to me, the gods and the goddesses. Yeah.
So I can say something about it as well.
Yeah, so they're not part of the refuges. So,
what's a refuge?
What's a refuge? Thanks. So the refuge. This is so the refuges are what we traditionally and we talk about as the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Because everybody knows this, so you're familiar with this kind of language. Are you, everybody? Buddha, Dharma, Sangha? Okay, good. So the Buddha here is, it's an image. It's an image that we kind of relate to a person who attained awakening, the story of the Buddha's awakening. But it also becomes an archetype. It becomes a pattern of what human beings can unfold in their lives, and a pattern of what is being unfolded within consciousness in a bigger way than just even my individual life. So in the Buddhist tradition, the refuge is this great vision of awakening. Yeah, that's the Buddha. And the Dharma is the second refuge. The Dharma is sometimes taken to be the kind of the truth of that, that conceived of as a kind of a state, as it were. But it also means the outpouring of inspiration, which comes from these figures on the tree, the outpouring of inspiration that we can rely on. And it raises a lot of questions about how we would know, how we would rely on a teaching and what that means. Maybe we can come to that. And then the Sangha is. Well, the Sangha means it's called the Arya Sangha, the noble Sangha. So we often talk about the LBC Sangha, don't we? So the word Sangha can be used in different ways. It can just mean a sort of community. Traditionally, it means the community of monks and nuns. That's what it means in traditional countries. But it means, in this sense, as a refuge, it means that which has been those people, those men, those women throughout the ages who have embodied the Buddha and the Dharma to a significant degree in their lives, and who kind of know that from their own experience and have a very profound understanding of that, and that's so they become reliable, not necessarily like reliable because of their character or because of all the contingent things that there are about human beings, but because they gave that teaching and they could embody that. So those are the things that we rely on. Those are the refuges.
Yeah, so the refuges are represented in the rest of the tree, aren't they? They're illustrated or symbolised in all of these kind of figures that are on this tree. But then the gods and the goddesses, you said, aren't refuges.
Yes. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think what's interesting about this is that, in our culture, I was talking actually in the announcements a little bit about paganism and Christianity and how it's winter solstice tomorrow. But in almost any culture, you have kind of traditional culture, you have some form of kind of gods and goddesses. Going back kind of most of human history, you have some form of kind of transcendental being, often a kind of creator myth, but not always actually. A lot of the time it's been these figures that are just kind of all powerful in some way, and in some ways we still have these kind of we still have gods in our own culture, and maybe we'll come on to that a little bit more. But traditionally, of course, this is coming from the Buddhist tradition, and in all of the countries that Buddhism kind of took hold, so ancient India, Tibet, China, later on Japan, later on, there were sort of native sort of gods before Buddhism kind of took hold, and the gods are kind of seen as, well, they might be sort of immortal and kind of powerful in lots of ways. They might be kind of existing in a kind of higher realm, but the Buddha is kind of sort of, well, above them in another way, because he's realized reality in its fullest. Yeah, so even though the Buddha was born as a human being, he's realized reality in its fullest, and has gone beyond this kind of cycle of craving and suffering that that human beings are trapped in, that unenlightened human beings are trapped in. So because he's gone beyond that, attained enlightenment, you could say he's sort of above and beyond even the gods, and certainly in terms of what's kind of useful for us to kind of revere and go for refuge to. So we talked about the refuges, like who and where can we find refuge from this cycle of craving and suffering. The Buddha is that for us, can be that for us if we go for refuge to him. Whereas these kind of these beings of gods and goddesses can't be that for us. That's how I kind of understand it. Is that how you understand?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I was thinking of the wheel of life when you were talking as well. You know, like gods can be can be a state of mind that comes about through action, through karma. So skillful action, skillful karma reaps positive states of mind. We know this. This is the story of. You could be a child's fable. You know, how you behave creates your state of mind. If you behave generously, that creates people act well towards you, you're happier, etc. It's not as simple as that. Obviously, it's never simple. But maybe it is simple, the story of Scrooge comes to mind, Scrooge was mean and miserly and people avoided him and children threw sticks and stones or whatever at his window. But when he was behaving differently, the world opened up to him in a different way, And so that's a simple teaching of karma. And the gods are said to experience the bliss that comes from eons and eons of positive, skillful action. But it's a state. So we can sort of think about that in our own lives, and maybe it'd be interesting to know if anybody's open to that in terms of something more than just our own lives, and whether gods might have some kind of existence, to use that word, outside of our own little sphere. But it's a result state, so it results from our karma, it results from our actions that we experience the world in a different way. We start to see. You can even see this in terms of your meditation practice. So if you sit for a while, what you attend to in your meditation starts to change your experience of your body. It starts to change your experience of what you think is possible in your life, even just sitting, and you're in a slightly different world. Maybe not a completely different world, but the principle is the same. But when the gods, you see, the gods are, that can run out in Buddhist thinking. The gods are not, they live for a very long time floating along on there. We sometimes say this about people, don't we? Oh, Surya Naga's in the god realm. He just sort of floats along from one cappuccino to the next or something, and nothing ever seems to touch him. He's so irritating. What? No, I don't mean. But gods, they can be, that can go on for a long time, but it will end. They're still within what we call the sphere of conditioned existence. So there's still no wisdom there, and it's the wisdom aspect that makes a Buddha a Buddha. It's the decisive seeing through of something. It's something that is decisively seen through, and that's what makes it a refuge. Whereas the gods merely experience the benefits of positive karma.
I think that's so important, like that distinction that you can be in a blissful state. You can experience bliss. We can experience pleasure, and we live in a time where there's so much pleasure to be had, don't we? There's so much luxury.
Could you tell me where it is?
Well, like in your computer, a lot of it. Right, in your computer, exactly. Yeah. Thanks, that's one place.
Yeah, that's mainly it, isn't
it? But actually, just through your computer, you can have so much kind of actual physical things, can't you? You can order a takeaway, for example. Suddenly you can get food delivered to your door, like any food that you can imagine, basically, can be delivered straight to your door. Yes. You can kind of conjure up any sort of image you want. You can. Amazon's doing a cracking trade this time of the year, aren't they? That's just like conjuring up any physical item, basically, you can dream of instantly. I think in lots of ways we do live in a God realm in this time and part of the world. But all of that stuff that we can get, that's very readily available for us to get, is all stuff of impermanence. It's all stuff that won't be everlasting, won't give us everlasting satisfaction. You can buy as many Amazon packages as you want, and you will never get one that will give you everlasting satisfaction. And it's that ignorance, that kind of unknowingness, that sort of slight, in a way, that delusion that we think the way when we relate to these things, these kind of worldly pleasures, as if they could be giving us everlasting satisfaction. That's an important characteristic of the God realm as well. The God realm, the gods, certainly in the Buddhist tradition, the way that the Buddhist tradition would talk about the gods, would be that they would have this sense of kind of ignorance, kind of conceit, conceit that actually I'm in this really pleasurable state. I can get whatever I want. I've got whatever I want. And that's great because it's going to last forever. And they're not quite seeing that actually, no, it's not. It's all going to end. All of this stuff is going to end, and we're going to feel a lot of disappointment when that comes if we don't acknowledge that.
I mean, you can see that if you go on a retreat or you meditate, and you can sometimes feel that you've achieved some kind of peace of mind, and it's however many times one does that, you think, oh, now I've got it, now that's it, I won't lose this one now. And it's not like a bad thing, but it's just a subtle level of not realizing that this too shall pass. This too, we still haven't. There's still more to understand about it all. In the Tibetan tradition, there are also these jealous gods. So there's the gods who've attained a state through their actions, and in a sense richly deserve that state. It's a state that arises through positive, skillful intention and so forth. And then there's the jealous gods, who are merely trying to get what the gods have got without doing the work, as it were. They just want to grab the fruit. They're firing arrows at the gods and trying to grab the pleasures from the tree of knowledge, or not the tree of knowledge, the tree of fruit, let's just say. They're trying to grab what the gods have got by force. And in a way, you're talking about our culture. It's a bit... if you go into Oxford Street at this time of year, I don't know whether there's anybody left in Oxford Street now, maybe they're all on Amazon now, but there was a big, last week it was extremely busy in Oxford Street, and this sort of rampant buying of stuff, and I know it, I get it, you've got children, you need to buy stuff, but it's kind of like, it's so embedded in our culture that we know in some ways just buying more tons of stuff, we do know that that's not quite satisfactory. In fact, it's deeply unsatisfactory on many, many levels. Yet there's the whole expectation to do it, the whole force of it. It's very hard to resist it. So it's almost not off. It's sometimes it's beyond a personal decision. We are wrapped up in this consumer machine, and we enjoy plenty of it. Let's not pretend that we don't. But it isn't. I don't think it really gives us a great deal of pleasure. That attitude of consumption. It certainly doesn't look pleasurable when you see it in action on Oxford Street. It looks graspy, and what the gods are not grasping after their experience. They're not. It's not. Being in a very positive state is to be in a state where you're not grabbing at things and grabbing at experience.
Well, there's a distinction actually. I heard this story quite fairly recently. A friend of mine who was ordained, he got the name Prasanna Deva, and Deva means god or goddess, and he was ordained by somebody else called Yashadeva. And Yashadeva was ordained by Sangharakshita, who founded our movement. And Yashadeva told this story when he gave Prasanadeva his name about him getting his name from Sangharakshita, which was that Sangharakshita said to him when he gave him his name that, because obviously he's just been called Deva, and we're talking about, in a way we're kind of denigrating the gods in the way that we're talking, so it might seem strange that Sangharakshita's then naming one of his disciples Deva. But when he gave him his name, he specified, he said, it's the Deva of the path, not the wheel.
Right.
Which I thought was really, just kind of like, just in that very short sentence, taught me a lot about what it means to be a Deva. I don't know if you're picking up on that as well.
The gods can hear the Dharma in the tradition. The gods can hear the Dharma and can practice the Dharma. It's just that they're not necessarily inclined to, because they're gods. They just but some of them do hear the Dharma. And the Buddha teaches in the canon. The Buddha teaches to the gods. Plenty of time he's just sort of, you'll see that the scriptures say, and there was many gods turned up. Many gods and goddesses turned up, and all kinds of other beings from the pantheon turned up to listen. So yes, you can be a god of the path, or a god of the wheel. You can just not practice Dharma. Yeah.
And I think in our life as well, that sort of means that we can choose, in a way that's the choice I think that we have. Are we going to be, when we're experiencing pleasure, because it's not like we'd want to go through life without any pleasure. Without ever kind of being in the God realm at all. But when we do experience pleasure, we've got the choice of whether or not we're going to be a Deva of the path or a Deva of the wheel. A Deva of the wheel would be one that kind of grasps at it and ends up becoming a jealous God, as you're saying. That's the next stage in the wheel of life. If you're sort of grasping and becoming jealous of other people's pleasure and getting into negative mental states along with your pleasure, then you end up going round the wheel and eventually kind of into the hell realms. But if you, like such just as saying, if you're engaging with pleasure in this kind of kind of open-handed way, in this way that acknowledges that it's not going to be lasting forever, acknowledges that all experience is changing, then that can actually almost counterintuitively lead to higher states, even higher states of pleasure actually. Certainly that's my experience from trying to engage in this way in meditation particularly.
Be interested to hear what people think about this and the gods and goddesses. I mean, like pleasure, what do we mean by pleasure? I've met many practitioners over the years, and one thing that struck me is that really Buddhist practice ought to result in some kind of happiness over time, at least. Some kind of ability to take delight in things, ability to have a kind of simple level of pleasure. It doesn't mean that your body doesn't get problems and you don't feel unhappy and down sometimes. It's not like that, but generally there's that sense of being able to take delight in just a friend, or being able to take delight in like I really appreciated coming and seeing these green arrangements on the shrine, these kind of sort of fern-like things that we've got here. And I took it in for about 2 seconds. But if you can take in beauty more, there's more pleasure, isn't there? There's more, and you can't really go grasping after like a pleasant scene. That's when you sort of start looking at a landscape and thinking you should be having some pleasure or having some big moment. But opening to beauty, opening to delight, opening to these experiences, and I've certainly seen in the Dharma and in the Sangha that kind of cultivation of simple pleasure, not necessarily the pleasure that comes through something that we think is going to give us pleasure, or we've been told in advertising since the year dot is going to give us some satisfaction, which turns out not to be quite like that. Or the images of a successful life, the images of what should make us happy, the things that we've been told about. But it is more of that kind of honest, or kind of just what gives us pleasure. It's being with other people, maybe that's what brings some people pleasure. Being in nature, being art, all those kind of inspirations. Those are the things that really lift us. But I did want. Sorry, did you?
No.
I was just going to ask about here. So any questions or thoughts about the gods? We've got one other thing I think we were going to talk about.
Do people recognise that idea of trying to relate to pleasure in different ways? Is Is that something that people have any experience of, or can imagine themselves doing? Yeah.
Definitely relates to that thing in meditation, or something good's happening, and then try and grab it and it's gone, and just developing the ability to step back and let it happen and attend to it gently, without messing with it too much. I think there's something about letting go that real pleasure involves.
Yeah, so Matt was talking about, don't know whether you could hear that, but talking about when something arises or we notice something in meditation, there's a tendency to sort of grab at it and try to sort of squeeze whatever there is to be squeezed out of it. But he noticed that approaching it more gently, well, with more sensitivity. That's interesting, isn't it?
I just found it was quite interesting that he said that. I just personally thought that one of the fundamentals of Buddhism is that you're supposed to get rid of life pleasures in order to really gain fulfillment and happiness, kind of thing. But it's interesting that you said that it's okay to kind of have pleasures here and now and then, but more the simplistic pleasure, like coming into the room and looking at the lovely forestry you have here, kind of thing. That is a simple form of pleasure in a way. Just upon that's an interesting point to raise in a way.
What's your name? Is it?
My name's actually Zen.
Zen.
Yeah.
Zen. Yeah.
Yes.
So just repeat that. Zen was saying that he was interested by the idea of taking pleasure, and how that isn't necessarily something that you hear a lot in the Buddhist tradition. It's not always emphasized. In fact, maybe it's even de-emphasized.
Yeah, it has been, and traditionally has been de-emphasized. I think, well, certainly Sangharakshita, the founder of our tradition, has pointed that out and said, there has been a bit of a de-emphasis in some ways, and I think a lot of that is culture. Well, there's all sorts of reasons for why that's happened, but certainly the way that Sangharakshita is kind of interpreted the teaching of the Buddha, it doesn't seem to actually make much sense, does it, to kind of de-emphasize pleasure that way. It seems to make a lot more sense, certainly to me, to focus more on the positive aspects of life, but just really, really being aware of like when pleasurable experiences are leading to craving and are leading to suffering, which could be a lot, but we need to be really, really aware of that, and sometimes moving away from them, especially if that's leading us in unhelpful cycles.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like so these, as we've got his teachers of the past, and on this Refuge Tree, many teachers, and in each phase of Buddhist history, there's been a necessity to teach the Dharma in a slightly different way. So actually the monks and the nuns who were around at the Buddha's day, they talked a lot about going beyond sense pleasure and not taking refuge in the body. And they would study the decomposition of corpses and things like that. And that was what they did, and they were trying to sort of go beyond that kind of level of relying on the body. They also coursed in meditative states which were deeply pleasurable, but they were not sense-based. So there's the tradition they're called the jhanas, the dhyanas. They were getting their pleasure, but it was not a sense-based pleasure.
Yeah.
But of course that's not and that wouldn't have been a necessarily appropriate teaching for everyone in the Buddha's day, and it's not maybe a complete teaching for us, a complete, like we teach, and a lot of Western Dharma traditions now teach getting embodied, feeling your body, learning to, to a certain degree, just enjoy embodied life and feel more of it, feel more, smell more, taste your food. The Buddha didn't go around saying, really enjoy your meals and things like this, but but these are teachings, and they're appropriate for our time, I think, and they really speak to people, and they're more soulful. And it's ridiculous to think of a spiritual life not containing pleasure. I mean, it would just be misery, wouldn't it? Does anyone? It's bad enough anyway, sometimes, isn't it, right? You want to give yourself a miserable spiritual life as well as anything else. Is there any questions online, Harold? No questions online. Good, right.
Yeah, do feel free to ask some questions online, and hopefully we'll get to them. Yeah. I wonder if we want to talk a bit about what the gods are doing on the Refuge
Go on
Tree.
then, yeah. What are they doing?
What are they doing? So if you look, maybe here you could point at the tree again, the image again. You can see on that image. So the gods, by the way, hopefully everybody has noticed, but they're the two kind of on the sides, the groups of they're quite kind of greenish figures, and what they're doing is they're making offerings actually to the refuges. They're making offerings of all sorts of things: flowers, incense, light, food, water, and they're making offerings. So what does that mean? Why would they be making offerings? Maybe you could say something about that.
What I was thinking about was when we come into a shrine room, it's traditional to bow. It's traditional to light a stick of incense. This happens all over the world. You come into a shrine room and you bow, and then maybe you light a candle. We're going to do a ceremony where we're going to do that. And why do we do that? Why do we do that? It doesn't necessarily come naturally to people who are maybe not just coming along to the Buddhist center. It doesn't come naturally. It certainly didn't come naturally to me to do that. There's something about recognizing something. You're facing the shrine when you do that and you make those offerings. Something about recognizing the existence of something that is higher and, if you like, or beyond or greater than merely your own personal preoccupations and sense of concerns that we all have about ourselves, which is not to denigrate that sense of ourselves at all. Far from it. It's just to recognise that. So we make those offerings, and we're sort of we're kind of preparing our minds. So when you meditate, when you meditate at home, wherever, it's good to have something there in front of you that you can make an offering to sometimes. Maybe you can collect something and make the offering. It can seem a bit, it's not, I don't find that a very, a natural thing to do, to collect a flower and offer it to the shrine. But having done it many times, it just keeps suggesting an openness to these values that are represented.
Yeah. And in the practice that this image is used is that we visualize this image of the refuge tree, and we prostrate before it. So this is a practice that is done when people are training for ordination in our tradition. They prostrate, which means to sort of bow with your whole body. You actually get onto the floor and sort of bow with your whole body. So you're giving your whole self to the refuges. You're going for refuge with your whole body. And you also imagine all beings kind of around you, behind you, around you, doing that at the same time with you. So all beings, particularly kind of, the way that it's described is your mother and all women on one side, and your father and all men on the other side. So all beings are going with you for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And that, I think, represents, well, not just represents, but sort of brings on board all of the different sides of yourself, all of the different kind of energies within you. We are sort of made up of all of the people in our lives, aren't we? Particularly our mother and father. We might have very complicated relationships with our parents. Actually, most of us do, I think, have a complicated relationship with our parents, but we're definitely kind of made up of them at least in some way. And we're made up of all other beings. And so we kind of bring them all on board and go for refuge with them. But then there's also these gods and goddesses that are also making offerings. And I think that's kind of one way to sort of think about that. One way that I've certainly thought about that is that those are kind of another aspect of ourselves. They're the sort of aspect of ourselves that we are worshipping. So we're all worshipping something. Even if you're a devout atheist and have been all of your life, you're still worshipping something, and that needs to be brought on board. So whatever the gods are for you, they need to be brought on board to the spiritual path, and they need to be kind of offering to the kind of highest ideal that is really in touch with reality as it really is, for us to really kind of, all of us, to go for refuge to that.
We are kind of culturally, we're not, as I say, we're not used to this. I went to Mongolia once and China, and went to quite a few Buddhist temples, and in the Mongolian temple they were offering all kinds of things to the shrine, including bottles of vodka and all kinds of stuff. And there's the culture is a culture of doing that, a culture of making offerings. I don't know what it means in those cultures entirely. Obviously, I was just passing through, but I think in this culture we have a particular, and I'm talking about myself as well. There's a particular reluctance to engage with these kinds of offerings of incense and flowers and candles. It's seen as maybe a bit naive, a bit kind of something that a bit superstitious, or what are you doing, and it's easy to feel that, and I certainly have felt that in the past, that kind of uneasiness. Is this just naivety? But because we're not used to, many of us, not all of us, but many of us are not used to the idea that there is a universe, kind of, that the universe is something that we're actively participating in and engaging within, and that we're on a path, and that this path is massive. I mean, these gods and goddesses are the universe pouring out celebration and offering about the latent possibilities within the universe as represented by the Buddha. I mean, this is pretty big stuff. This is not small stuff. They're pouring out praise that the Buddha broke through to Buddhahood, ultimately, which is an enormous ideal. It's something that is it's amazing, I think, if in life we can even get a sense or a small taste in our imagination of what even the Dharma is pointing to, because it's pointing to something that's so profound. It has the Buddha doesn't represent some static end point that you get to and then you can rest and that's it and you're done. It's the symbol of, I don't know, in endless participation and unfolding of the whole cosmos, which is, why we use these images like this, which have the blue sky, and they have this sense of the enormity of things arising in an almost cosmic way, beyond time and space, and increasingly, these figures represent the possibility of something that is beyond even time and space, consciousness that doesn't take any dimension or any temporality in that way, which is really hard to imagine. So it's a big vision, and the gods are kind of cheering. They're often just applauding. They're just like showering down all the earthly goods, everything that you can imagine that's precious. They say, have all this, just have all of this, and because it's all, even if we could offer you the entire physical universe, it wouldn't be enough to offer the Buddha. So that's why the gods are in there, because they are us in a way. They are us opening ourselves to the influence of the Buddha. They are us kind of preparing our minds so that we can receive those teachings, and they are us rejoicing in the possibility of that within the universe. And wow, if we could just touch on that a little bit, that'd be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's people's response to that? Or that, some sense of what that would mean for yourself, or do you just feel like that's just completely something that you can't respond to at all? Or
Inspiring. Yeah.
How do you respond to it? So how's it?
Yeah, I mean, sort of just makes me think of choirs of angels and got that magnitude, but something that doesn't really work anymore for us, the Christian thing that's of that magnitude. And in a way, they're just basically trying to say something beyond what we could really talk about. That's how big it is, I guess.
Yeah. Somebody was asking, Matt was talking about choirs of angels coming to mind in Matt's mind. Somebody in the tea break was talking about going to a carol service, and what is that like as a Buddhist going to a Christian service. And I remember we sang Handel's, I sang Israel in Egypt by Handel, and there's this rising line that said, and their cries rose up unto the Lord. And as their cries rose up unto the Lord, and I was singing it, I was thinking, my God, I might be a Christian. My cries are rising up unto the Lord. And it's like, it's not to be taken literally, all of that, I think. It's not to be dismissed as mere poetry. It's kind of, it's quite difficult to take all these images that we've been learning about in kind of, because we're very keen and we're very sensitive to taking things literally. We have a tradition of doing that, don't we? Not seeing beyond all the simplicities of that religious mode of consciousness and thinking, but actually that means that we might dismiss something that is really, really important and really, really touching, and that is part of our possibilities. And if it's angels, it's angels. I mean. There's that wonderful Rilke line, every angel is terrifying, or something at the beginning of the Duino elegies. Wish I could remember more of it now. I've said the first line, every angel is terrifying. And he talks about angels as these terrifying, beautiful forms. It's such an extraordinary evocation, and angels may become more significant to us as we practice, and they might, I don't know.
It's interesting. They do pop up again and again throughout different cultures, this symbol of angels, and then there must be some significance to that, these kind of incredible winged figures. And I know that Arlika, who's an order member, who's an artist, his paintings of devas look a lot like angels, because he's not afraid to take inspiration from that tradition, because he knows that resonates with him, and it resonates with many people in the West, that maybe devas could or can or do or look more like angels, at least to us. That image, it says something, isn't it?
And that's one of the beautiful things that I found with the Buddhist path, is it's reimagining all of this. Like, I didn't culturally come from a place where it was at all acceptable to talk about angels. It was just all hocus pocus, and I even feel slightly embarrassed talking about them now. But like it's like we have one of the gifts of the Dharma for many people is that it's an invitation to start reimagining these types of things, and we have to use the form of the Buddha. We talk about the Buddha, but what's the Buddha? That's an act of imagination to imagine the Buddha. So we're doing that as practitioners and as a community, and as time passes, we're doing that. We're reimagining these figures. We're reimagining angels. Arleko's paintings are a wonderful example. Somebody really trying to grapple with the artistic form and the sensibility in that way. But there's for each of us, it's it's some people are more at ease and able to imagine these things than others. So how are you with it? Do you enjoy it, that kind of?
I do, actually. I was quite lucky in my life that the way that I was raised was very, very agnostic, and my mum was kind of like, just work out what you want for your kind of spiritual life, I guess. I don't know if she would have phrased it like that, but she wasn't religious, and she was just kind of like opened sort of gave me books and things about the way that the world works, and I just kind of took all of that in, and until I then came to Buddhism. So I was quite lucky in that I was quite sort of agnostic to it. I definitely got influenced a bit, in my teens by the sort of, I guess, quite pervasive, dominant culture of the modern West, which is actually a culture of kind of, I think, skepticism and ultra kind of rationalism and, atheism, I think now, isn't it? I'm pretty sure atheism is dominant now, isn't it? It's much more dominant than Christianity in the West. And so I was influenced by that to some extent, but I think maybe I had less barriers to break down because I started from such an agnostic place. But yeah, what about you? You weren't raised a Christian, right? I guess sort of more on the atheist end of the spectrum. I'm not sure whether people talk about atheism so much these days, do they? I mean, they are, I think, probably, maybe
but
a bit less now, actually.
It's almost like people don't really bother.
Yeah. It's the default, isn't it?
It's like people used to bother being atheist, but now maybe there is more openness. Maybe there is also a little bit more searching these days. I feel like people are quite open. Well, I mean, I live and work around a Buddhist centre, so I meet a certain range of people, right? But I do feel that there are people are looking for stuff, and the whole, we used to talk about, we used to not quite emphasise the Buddha and Buddhism and the religiosity, as it were, in our classes, maybe 20 years ago I'm talking about now, because people would kind of come and say, I don't want any of that religious nonsense, but I like your meditation, thanks, we'll have some of that. But now people don't mind. People can take it or leave it. People know that you don't have to be a Buddhist to come to the Buddhist center. There's a sort of a little bit more freedom. I think for people, and more of a necessity for people. People really feel. Again, I'm generalizing, but a lot of people do feel that sense of, well, what is the meaning of all this? Where is this society we're in going? What is the promise that's being held out? Doesn't seem to be really working, and so there is a sense of searching and a sense of openness. And I do think that. I think you're right that generally it sort of could be classed as atheist as well. I was certainly brought up without any feeling for what we're talking about now. But again, it was a good upbringing because it gave me the freedom to sort of do.
Yeah, that's what's important, isn't it? The freedom, open-mindedness. Did people kind of agree with that or relate to that? Do you have a sense of like, do you feel like you're kind of in that state where you're able to open up to different sort of kind of myth and ways of seeing reality and the world, or do you feel like actually your kind of cultural conditioning, whatever that may be, is so strong that it closes you off to certain things?
I particularly related to what you were saying about the almost feeling embarrassed about doing certain ritual, the actual actions of ritual, because I think you're right, that kind of skepticism is really ingrained in our culture, for good and bad. But I think even now, I like coming to the Buddhist Center, I still get a bit like, ooh, well, exactly what you're saying. When people say it's a bit religion-y, yet I think I come here because I think we don't have church anymore. There's not really nobody tends the flock. I think there's a lot. Like one of my good friends is a psychologist who's deathly afraid of death, but she's very much an atheist. Because I don't think she can. And I'm kind of in the same boat. I get it. It's hard to make that leap to be like, well, why bother believing in anything else if you really can't square it in your head? So it's particularly when you're talking about the being stuck and the being frozen. I thought that was very it's pertinent to me, but I think it's pertinent to a lot of people. Feeling stuck no matter how much money you make.
Yeah. Sorry, what's your name?
Alexander.
Alexander was saying quite a few things there, and that particularly you were relating to that feeling of being a bit sort of embarrassed about the religiosity. Say coming to the Buddhist center, there's a certain amount of bowing and what's all that and offering, but also that well, you do come, you do feel it's a place. I'm sort of putting words in your mouth now, but you feel it's a place where you want to come, and it kind of relates to something that's to do existential for you. That's important. And I think like when you feel that awkwardness, or when you feel that, like we're going to do a little ceremony in a moment, so you'll have plenty of chance to feel awkward. It's definitely it's not something you can just sort of brush under the carpet. But there are moments when you can sort of say, I don't want to make an offering, I don't want to do that. There'll be a moment when you might say, okay, I'll give it a whirl. I'll give that a go. And it's not saying that the heavens are going to open up and the gods are going to reveal themselves and everything's going to. But there can be that moment. There are sort of moments when you might feel swept along by something. Where you might feel that's something that your heart at some deeper level does consent to, even despite your rational and Alexander says sort of pointed at skepticism. That's a positive thing in many ways, and it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It blocks off, it reveals certain things and certain truths, but it also cuts away our maybe deeper instincts.
If we think it's the only truth.
If we're wedded to being skeptical and clever and rational, and that's the only thing that we really, that's
only way of seeing the world.
We just get our kicks out of that. I used to get a lot of kicks out of that. But I don't think people like me for it very much. That was one of the main problems.
Should we do
let's do that.
Okay.
So thanks very much. And Surya Naga is going to be